Welcome friends, good to have you all with us. My name is Henrik Palmgren, and wherever you are in the world, I hope you are comfy and ready for some Red Ice Radio. We are going to spend some time today talking about the Church of Global Warming with our guest James Follett, who joins us from Sydney down in Australia. I hope you had a chance to see his film called just Church of Global Warming. We had it linked up on redicecreations.com. James has been generous enough to link up his whole production for free online via his website climatereview-net, and of course on his YouTube channel as well then. It's a very well-made documentary that goes into the details of the science and economics as well behind global warming, and examines the claims from both sides of the climate change / global warming camps, as it were. And we're going to talk about his film and his research a little bit more in detail here on the program today. So with that, welcome to Red Ice Radio. James, thank you for joining us today, and I know it's early for you down in Sydney, so we really appreciate you having you, know.
No problem. Skål, Henrik, and greetings to all your viewers, and hope this will be informative and interesting for you guys, and thank you for having me on your show. Absolutely.
Skål, as I say, thank you very much. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came about making this film. I know that you have a background in terms of the energy industry, working for renewable energy companies and things like this. Tell us about it, James.
Well, yes, I have, for a relatively young guy, quite a varied background. Sort of a master of many things, but not really a master at all of any of them at all. And I started off at university, I guess, doing a natural sciences degree. And that I did that at Cambridge, and that's a very awesome degree in the sense that it's very broad. So many degrees these days you say, well, I did biology or chemistry or physics. Well, in this degree, and it's set up on purpose to be so, it's very varied. So I did maths, I did chemistry, I did biology. I didn't do so much of the physics, which is, I know, slightly not as relevant for climate change, but it did give me a founding and an understanding of how to look at the scientific process and evidence. I really enjoyed it, actually, and by the last year I specialized in neuroscience, which is a fascinating topic. I really did enjoy that, and I went to Berlin because I also wanted to learn languages. I was never that good at languages at school, but I always had a fascination because there's always this connection between language and culture, and if you can speak a few words and try to speak a few more words in any place you're visiting, then obviously you're going to get a good reception. And I had German exchanges throughout my schooling, so I thought, well, I'll go to Berlin. The beauty of the European Union in this case is that I was able to get a job by literally one evening thinking, well, I've had enough working for a bank here in London. I need to go out and see a bit of the world. And I just wrote 2 emails, and both departments, one in, I think it was Heidelberg, and one in Berlin, said, yeah, sure, have a job. And I thought, well, the Heidelberg one is very famous. We're internationally famous, but I thought, well, Berlin is also an amazing city. So I chose Berlin, and I spent 6 months there, and I would have carried on doing that. But there are some complications I heard from people with regards to careers in science, and I was not sure. I was a big umming and ahhing, should I do a career in science? But I think, you know, I would have liked to maybe spend more than the 6 months there, maybe a year or two, but I wasn't sure that perhaps the PhD route was particularly for me. I had friends who were doing them, you know, at London University and various other universities back home. I say back home because that's one of my homes, and a major home. And after that, I got called by my brother for his wedding in Sydney. So I came over for a holiday, and you may perhaps be a backpacker, the usual thing, you know, the Europeans going to Australia and backpack around Thailand and all that. But I've done a lot of that, and I just got a job here, and I never left. I got a job working first for the prisons, which was quite an interesting job. And then after that, I got a job working for a renewable energy company, which of course I can't mention because there's a big conflict of interest of what I've done in this movie and what a renewable energy company would want to see happening in the marketplace. They all know about me doing this, so it's not like I'm doing it behind their back, but of course I just can't mention who it is.
Okay, well, there you go. We can talk a little bit more about renewable energy and how the economic situation has the connection as well here to the whole global warming situation as well. But how was your time in Cambridge, by the way, in terms of science and education there? What was there? if I can put it this way, what was the level of indoctrination when it comes to climate change when you took that science course there? Was that an issue at all for you?
Well, for me, I guess climate change only has really come on my radar in the last couple of years. So I was more on the sort of, we did do, proper full-on chemistry and quantum theory and, all these awesome concepts of the universe, which really did go over my head, unfortunately. I wish we understood more. But mostly I was on the biological side. So climate change wasn't really on my radar until a personal interest that came later on.
Okay, I see. So why did you want to make the movie? What got you into this whole area, and when did you set up your website and so forth?
Well, it's actually pretty much around when the Great Global Warming Swindle, the awesome movie by Martin Durkin, came out. But it's actually just a little bit before. I remember that for some reason there was perhaps a little bit more exposure in the press with regards to. I mean, there's always been exposure for the last 20 years about global warming. We've been spammed by it, but perhaps there was slightly elevated in Australia. And I thought, well, actually, this is something we should be concerned about, as both the scientific interest in me perked, and also the fact that the company I work for and the work that I do for them, which is in many ways looking at strategies and looking at portfolios and risk and all this sort of carry on, is very relevant to my company. So I actually said to my boss, can I look into this global warming phenomenon and see some of the science behind it? Because, as you know, I'm a bit of a scientist, so I can perhaps understand some of what these guys are saying and come to our own conclusion. Of course, this is extremely important because the company I work for will make a ton of money from the whole emissions trading. And the market, and we are like a trading sort of company. All these energy companies trade contracts. And if you have perhaps better intelligence than the next player, then you have obviously an advantage in the marketplace. So my boss said, yeah, okay, you can go ahead and look into it. So I went to look into it, completely neutral. I had no opinion either way, no, as far as I think, no preconceptions. And so I went into it, and very rapidly, the first website I got to, actually, obviously the first on the Google hit list was Real Climate, which is a pro website. And so I was reading their stuff, and it to me, it all sounded very convincing. And then as I probed a little bit further, perhaps the skeptic side just sort of started to ram home. And the message was, I kept going back to Real Climate and the New Scientist also website as well. And I think it was Nick Calder was ousted from there, wasn't he? Because he wasn't playing for the right side.
Yeah, that's right.
And I kept on going back to these websites, and I was thinking, well, where is actually your evidence? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm looking for evidence, and I couldn't find any. So I pretty quickly became skeptic. And by the time the movie The Great Global Warming Swindle came out, I was pretty much, listening to it avidly, the message these guys were saying. So I can't really remember the transition, but it was pretty quick when I went from, I would say, completely neutral to being skeptic, because I was just looking for evidence and I couldn't see any.
So there's a side note here that maybe we can talk a little bit about right away. Australia have basically a toilet tax, don't they? At least some parts in Australia, I've heard that they've begin to bring this in, and I've heard that one of the issues might be because of water conservation, but it's connected with the carbon tax issue. Do you know anything more about this?
It sounds very Australian. They call it the dunny tax around here, of course.